Hi, everyone, and welcome to Studio Jake. I, of course, am your host, Jacob Airy. Welcome to my vidcast where I talk about all things pop culture from anime to film to television to novels. And also, occasionally, I talk about stand-up comedy, but I can't do that by myself. I'm not an expert in it. So if you go ahead and like this video, share it out to everyone, subscribe to the channel, because I have a very special guest who's come on. I'm a huge fan of her comedy. She is fantastic. She's one of the co-hosts of the Simpcast. She has the Chrissie Mayr podcast and Mar in the Mornings here on YouTube. So please welcome to Studio Jake, the one and only Chrissie Mayr. Chrissie, thank you for
Hello,
joining me.
Jake. It's great to be here.
And we're
I have a
excited to
new
have you
I
on.
have a new podcast sign.
It looks
Yep.
fantastic too.
It's really it's the little things.
I'm gonna have to, yeah. I have. I'm shilling for a whole bunch of other stuff behind me. I'm gonna have to get one that just says Studio Jake eventually. But
Yes, definitely. There's ones on Amazon.
oh,
Not that they're sponsoring me or anything, but I was so excited to see ones that were semi-reasonable because I noticed like Tim Dillon has this huge neon sign and I looked up who did it and it was like over $1,000 and I'm like, well, F me. That's never gonna happen. So I was so thrilled to find like a reasonable one.
it makes perfect sense. And also, one of the things that I really admire about you is how you are. Speaking of pop culture, you don't just do stand up. You also do podcasting. You do shows with other comedians and influencers. And I'm just a little curious. Where did you get your start into comedy? Did you just wake up one morning and be like, "Hey, mom, dad, I'm going to hit the road. I'm going to be a stand-up comedian," or was it kind of a slow progression?
It was slow and I never had the either like money, balls, confidence. Like, I don't know. I never out the gate was like, I'm going to do stand up, like deal with it, parents. I graduated college. I thought I wanted to be a reporter, majored in communications, had an internship at NBC in college. I worked at Dateline, which is like a news magazine show. And I met Stone Phillips. I'm like, okay, he's incredibly boring. I don't think I want to be a reporter. I was able to get an internship at Conan for my senior year of
Oh,
college
nice.
for credit, which I'm to this day astounded that I was able to like pull that off, that I was able to like reach out and get that. And I was just so lucky because these internships are so hard to come by, and usually it's like the son or daughter of somebody that works there that
Right.
and regular people don't have a chance. But I think I got lucky because of it was like the school semester, not during the summer. So I realized, okay, comedy, these are my people. This feels better. Like I was always a funny person, like always kind of class clowning, acting up, and then just kind of being in a comedy environment at this internship really helped. And I was not so much hanging out with Conan, although I would learn like his favorite coffee order or like his favorite yogurt or like just running errands for him. I was mostly spending time with the production assistants or the writers, and they said, if you're interested in comedy, do improv. And
Mm.
so I did a little bit of improv in college, but couldn't commit fully because they were like, you're not a theater major. Get out of here. I was like, they're like, you're a swimmer, even though I was a diver. They're like, you're a swimmer. What do you know? I've definitely got shade for not being a theater major. And then when I graduated, I started with the UCB theater, did that, did 5 years of improv between the UCB and the Magnet Theater, then did a one woman show, and then started stand up in like March of 2010.
Oh, wow.
Um, and I've been doing it like ever since then. So it's what, 13 years later. I have literally always had at least one or two day jobs until 2022 is the first year of just doing stand up and podcasting without a day job because I was fired from my last one because I wouldn't take the vax. So I was like, all right, let's try this out. And I always wanted to, like, my goal was always, okay, just make your living off of podcasting and comedy, just being yourself in some way. Like, my dream was always just like not have to work for somebody else. And so in a sense, I'm like, okay, awesome, I've made it. Like, I don't need to be rich or anything. And I was always afraid to quit or take the plunge because I was like, oh, I need insurance. So I'm lucky that it took, the last couple, the circumstances of the last few years to allow me. And then I kind of took the stance like when the lockdowns hit and de Blasio put forth the mandates in New York City, I was like, look, I'm just not going to perform anywhere that has these mandates. I just think it's wrong. And I was always working, I'd been at that day job for like 6 years and remotely for the last 2 of them. And then they were like, well, we have to have everyone back in the building now, probably to justify like New York City rents. And everyone's got to get the thing. So I was like, I'm not getting the thing. And so they were like, bye. But I feel like that was also politically motivated because it was I guess the bigger I got, it feels weird because I still don't even think I'm big or anything yet at all. But I did Megyn Kelly's podcast. Then my boss would kind of like see that, and I could see it would like piss him off because I could see all his emails because it was literally my job to read and write his emails. So I think ever since like that summer, the summer of 21, he wanted to get rid of me because my politics were made pretty clear to him through different articles and things I'd been involved with. And he was like, oh, because I said January 6th was pretty chill on the Megyn Kelly podcast. And that upset him for some reason. I'm like, who cares? I use my vacation days. Like, what? How is it any of your business?
Exactly.
But like, I was working for a millionaire elite, like the classic, Hollywood elite type, liberal media, multiple houses type. So that was not destined to last much longer. I think and I got that job when I was just like, wow, I'm so happy to have a job in media. But then 2018 started becoming like more red pilled. Also, my mom died that same year. So I started to focus more on comedy, like getting on more podcasts. And then all the pandemic stuff like really opened my eyes to a lot of truths about just the way the world works. And I think that shaped my personality and like my point of view to become like just care more about politics in general and what's going on with the world. And yeah, that's the last couple of years has been a process of having my stand-up match who I feel like I am just on podcasts or talking with people or on my, other shows. So I want that to kind of, and it is getting that way. It's catching up. Because for a while I was just doing the same jokes that I had for years of doing stand-up. So it's like trusting in yourself that you can do those rants or you can try out those new ideas and that they'll work on stage and that, you won't get canceled for it. Or now I'm at the point where I'm so grateful. I feel like I have honed an audience of real fans that know me, that I don't have to spend like my first few moments on stage, like introducing myself and like trying to win them over. Cause that's the best part about doing stand-up is you can perform for a room full of people that are already your fans. So you can just like get to it instead of being like, I'm a redhead, or like some of the earlier jokes that I would do when I was newer in stand-up where you have to like get your kind of deal across, in the first few jokes.
It's really interesting what would set people off because I didn't lose a job. I was actually unemployed during most of the lockdown.
You beat them to it. You're like, yeah,
exactly. But I got kicked out of a movie theater because I was wearing a mask because there's a big sign. I think if you go into an establishment and you're going to patron it, you should follow their rules. That's my opinion. So I did put on my mask, but I refuse to participate in this government thing. And so the lady at the box office, I had already bought my tickets. I said, hey, I've got my ticket. I'm going to go see this movie. It was The Eternal. So maybe I dodged a bullet there, but they said, well, I need to see your Vax card. And I said, absolutely not. And they kicked me out. They did refund. Nice.
I literally have, well, except for Captain America, I got the Eternals,
awesome.
like Happy Meal toys, and I couldn't collect them all. I'm missing a few. So if anybody's got the missing 2, hit me up.
There you go. And later when the whole thing happened with the Canadian truckers, I backed them, and so I got uninvited to an Oscar podcast. I was supposed to. I got totally ghosted. Yeah, for supporting blue collar workers. It was unreal to me. But it's really weird what sets people off. I really feel that 2020 and 2021 really empowered the Karens of the world. It gave them a reason to exist outside of just being annoying. And one of the things I respect about your comedy in particular is, for one thing, it's funny. I always laugh when I watch your shows or your clips on YouTube or whatever. And I also see how authentic you are, that you really bring out the best of yourself when you get on stage. And you kind of came on my radar because I follow Anna, that Star Wars girl, and Melanie
Oh,
Mack,
cool.
and I got introduced to you through them. And at first I was kind of like, who is this Chrissie Mayr person? Why is she everywhere now? She's on all the YouTubers that I follow. And then, but
Too
then,
many places. Yeah.
yeah, that's how I got connected to your work. And I'm just curious, like you said, getting into doing stand up and stuff. I've heard people like, the late great Norm Macdonald talk about stand up as an industry, about how it's still part of sort of the entertainment industry, but it's got its own sort of sub sector. And I'm curious, working both in television and for someone like Conan O'Brien, and then going off on your own and doing your stand-up comedy, what would you agree with that? Do you feel like being in both worlds, do you see the sort of different aspects, and if so, how are they different?
Totally. There are multiple like subgroups or cliques or whatever you want to call them of comedy. There's like the comedians that they move to LA, they know for sure they want to, and this is like maybe not now because Hollywood is sort of crashing and burning, but the typical thing would be like, whether you're from LA or New York or the middle of the country, you would be like, okay, I want to be in movies, I want a sitcom, I'm moving to LA. It used to always just be there 2 stand-up scenes, New York and LA. And if you want to be serious about stand-up, you're going to move to one of those cities. And this is like 90s, early aughts. Now it's totally different. You can succeed in comedy and live anywhere. But people would move to LA being like, okay, I'm going to get in with casting directors, I'm going to do auditions. It's like you're merging with the acting world. And LA does attract more actors, like actors dabbling in comedy rather than like comedians dabbling in acting. So you get more kind of like that superficial, that like showboaty, kind of like shitty LA type of person. And again, these are sweeping generalizations. Like there are good comics that live out in the LA area for sure. And then you have like New York, which are more like, the New York comics are more kind of like scrappy. They kind of get high on the fact that they're doing 5+ spots a night. Like the open mic scene is ridiculous. You can just hit so many spots. You grind really hard. You get some kind of a restaurant or barista or office job, and you just go nuts there. And that pipeline is more like late night spots, then maybe eventually like HBO's, Comedy Central special, and then maybe eventually like sitcoms, commercials too. But that's whereas like, so that's the difference between like people who move to LA versus New York. And but the pandemic and the lockdowns really changed all that. YouTube and TikTok really changed all that. I think probably since the last 20 years has been it's just been like an upheaval in the comedy industry, because at the end of the day, like there's so much competition for your attention and your entertainment. It's so much easier to stay home and watch Netflix than to like go shower, get dressed, get in the car, drive to a comedy club, pay the ticket, do 2 drink minimum, then you're paying for a date, right? Or maybe it's somebody you know or weren't familiar with, maybe you're offended, you walk out, you're like, oh. It was an effort to go to a comedy club, but usually it's because you liked comedy and you wanted that experience. Now comedy and comedians are in your pocket, which is like good and bad. It's great for developing a following quickly. It's great for engagement and getting yourself out there, but it's bad. It leaves you more vulnerable to cancellation, because people that wouldn't have organically come across you are now like, what, this joke? Like, who is this girl, Chrissie Mayr? All I see is that she is posing on a desk at InfoWars saying, my stripper name is Sandy Hook. Let's cancel her. So you're in the pockets of people that aren't funny or don't have a good sense of humor or don't have your sense of humor or don't appreciate you, or like, different intelligence level, different just, life experiences. It used to be like the people that were experiencing and consuming comedy wanted that to happen. And that's why cancel culture has blown up, because we have gotten in the feeds of people who don't like comedy, don't understand comedy, don't appreciate, like, maybe they do like comedy and you're just not their style at all. And we're also, all of us have so much power. If you have a social media account, you have the power to cancel somebody, and it's like a rush. It feels good. You're like, yeah, this person's never going to work again because of me. You're like, I don't have to work on my stuff. I just made this person stop doing the thing. But comedy has segments. So there's all these segments of the comedy world. There's like the professional and like pre-professional ones, the ones that are in the ears of the cast. They have management. They're in good with the casting directors. They're not super problematic that they're, getting off the list for like a Letterman or a Leno, or now it's like Fallon and Kimmel and all the rest of them. Like they're doing all the right things. They get into Montreal just for laughs. They get into all the important festivals. That's like they're on that professional track. If you're problematic or have the wrong political opinions, then you're immediately off that track. Or if you're
Right, of
somebody like
course.
Tim Dillon, I guess, falls into that. He's a perfect example of somebody. But even if you follow that pre-professional track, there's a huge bottleneck, and you see so many comics, even at the 20 plus year level, like they're all just hanging up, waiting for their breakthrough, and it's not coming. And somebody like, hopefully like myself, or definitely Tim Dillon, he just goes around the bottleneck, creates, is himself, doesn't, never got past at, I think, not the Comedy Store, but the Comedy Cellar in New York City, got his own huge following on YouTube. Boom, he already has his following. So now who is he attractive to? Like
Guys like me.
basically comedians, like comedy clubs on the road. They're like, great, you can fill a 200 seater plus, like, great, let's give you a weekend. And he's, that's what's been going on the last 20 years. You can bypass the bottleneck, the professional typical track, by going around, and TikTok as well, getting your own following on TikTok or YouTube or Twitter, any or all of the social media platforms. Boom, you get your fan base, you can fill a room, and you have a career that way. And that, yes, legitimate comedians have been taking advantage of that, but also some folks who end up performing at comedy clubs sort of back their way into it, which was like Jeremy Piven. He was an actor who kind of got canceled, or Me Too'd or something, and then he pivoted into comedy. Okay, like he figured it out because he had that pre-made base of fans, people that just they'll see him just sitting in a box for an hour. Like they'll see him do anything. So, he's doing comedy, we can see him, great. They'll buy those VIP tickets, they'll fill the room. So he kind of had the fan base first, then figured out how to do comedy. And by figured out, I mean paid someone to write a set for him. But we all do it different ways. And then you also have your TikTokers and YouTubers who get that representation. They'll have an agent like UTA or like William Morris, and they'll be like, hey, we can make money off this person. This person has a huge following. They can sell tickets. Hey, so-and-so, do you want to figure out how to do 45 minutes of comedy or something on stage that we can sell tickets to? Because an agent or a manager knows that person is profitable, and the comedy club owner is happy because they just want to fill the room. Do they necessarily care if it's with a seasoned like stand-up comic who's done it the right way, or someone who just became an overnight viral success and within 6 months has 1 million followers? They don't really care. They're just trying to stay in business.
And
But
that's
those
a good point
TikTokers and
is
YouTubers will really upset like the stand-ups who've been doing it for a long time,
right.
because they're like, fuck, like they're deep down jealous that they haven't figured out how to blow up so quickly and get that fan base. Like they think, oh, I'm good enough, talented enough. Why is this success not happening for me? And to see somebody pass them like that is infuriating.
And that's a good point, is going around sort of these industry checkpoints, I guess,
Yeah, the
which is
gatekeepers. Yeah.
exactly, which is one of the reasons I make StudioJake Media independent, right? I've got my website, I've got my YouTube channel, and I clone it to Rumble and Odyssey, and it's still humble, nothing wrong with that. But I'm just saying, say if I got signed on with someone from Con Inc. or Big Con or whatever they want to call it, well then they might not want me to talk to you for whatever reason, but I'd be like, no, I want to have Chrissie Mayr on because she's doing really great things in comedy. She's has her hands in all these different pies, and I want to talk to her about that. And that's a really great point. And to that point, for me, stand up, when I grew up in a conservative Christian household, so we didn't watch a lot of stand up, right? Jeff Allen and Anthony Griffith were probably or Michael Jr. That's probably the three biggest names I ever heard in the house. And whenever I, became an adult and I started listening to Norm Macdonald stand up or Jerry Seinfeld or Jay Leno or whoever it was, one of the things I thought was interesting was just how willing they were to take bold risk. I think it was, uh, I'm trying to, I'm trying to think of his name, but I heard a comedian recently say a comedian doesn't know where the line is until they stepped over it. And I'm curious because it felt like I don't want to put a specific year, but I'm going to say 2016. There was this uh, thing where everyone's like, we're not only not stepping over the line, we're going to tell you other comedians where the line is. We're going, like you said, gatekeeper. We're going to gatekeep, so you can't make jokes about this. You can't go on the Alex Jones show or InfoWars or whatever. Those are the same things, I guess, but you know what I mean. Why do you now? Fortunately, like with Dave Chappelle and Chris Rock and Anthony Camilla, there's like this big pushback to that. Uh, um, where do you think that whole sort of like I use the term Karen, or that Karening of stand-up comedy came in, and do you agree that there's some pushback to bring it back to the way it was?
Yeah, I think some of the gatekeepers, whether that's like the booker for Colbert or the booker for the hottest current show in Brooklyn right now, like they either have these same ideals, they are woke, they're Democrats, they're feminists, like they are either exactly that, or they know what the Stephen Colbert show, they know what the sponsors like and don't like. They know what the censors like and don't like. They're aware of like what what is it, public TV or whatever the rules are, FCC or something. They're either aware of what the rules are, what the channel likes or doesn't like, and by that way they censor. They go, okay, you're obviously you do a joke about trans people, that's not going to go over well. So they'll kind of whittle it down. Like I, for a brief like split second, was kind of in the running for a spot on Colbert, but I know folks that have been even closer. And I know that the process is like you submit your set, and then they sometimes have you do it like multiple times, taking certain jokes out. Like it's very, very edited and very like consciously constructed for that show. It's passed through many hands. And by the end of it, you might have something that like feels awkward and isn't your like authentic, passionate self, So whether they're kind of censoring you because that's how they feel, or they're going, okay, well, we just know what's going to fly or not fly on this particular show. Whereas
Wait,
something like
Russell
a producer,
Brand. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but it
okay,
was Russell Brand who said a comedian doesn't know where the line is until he
okay,
crosses.
there
I
you
just
go.
remembered it. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
No, that's good
I
to
just
know.
remembered it.
I
It
was
was
wondering
Russell
who said
Brand.
that. Okay, cool.
Sorry.
And whether they believe that themselves or they just know what their overlords demand, right? And then, but you have someone like, oh, a booker in Brooklyn. It's like, okay, well, it's a live show. So then maybe it goes into, okay, maybe that is that booker's personal political opinion. But I remember like, gosh, like after I was at January 6th, I just say the example of like the booker from Brooklyn because she booked a show in Brooklyn, a couple shows. And I'll never forget, like I worked with her a few times. We weren't like besties or anything, but enough where she knew who I was, and not tight or anything. And she tweeted out, like, I think I was able to just get one tweet out that day because the reception was so bad. She's like, I don't know what the comics in LA are doing right now, but ours are storming the Capitol. And I thought that was very strange that she even retweeted it. And the fact she would say, like, our comics, like, take some sort of, I don't know, like speaking for me in a way. And I'm like, we kind of like barely know each other. It's just, I thought
Right.
it was a very odd thing. And then the backlash that ensued after the 6, I was like, oh, this is, people are virtue signaling about this. Like they're really
Mhm.
hating on anybody who was in DC that day. And then later on, I'd have people reaching out to my Facebook friends being like, hey, just letting you know, you're friends with Chrissie Mayr still on Facebook. And she was at the Capitol on the 6th. So you should probably defriend her, like unfriend her. And then I had folks being like, we should make a list of all of the comedians that were at January 6th. And it turns out it's just me and one other guy. It's like not a long list. But that's when I really started to see efforts to cancel me or obliterate me or make sure I was never booked again, just for simply like being at a rally. And it didn't matter what context I was there. It doesn't matter. Like the truth was I was there to cover it as kind of an independent journalist and just get a man on the street view of things. But people, for most people, you might as well have been shitting on Pelosi's desks. It's kind of like the mainstream media has made it seem like they're kind of one and the same. And just to demonize dissent or demonize patriotism, all of that, right? So like the masses have been kind of trained to think a certain way about that day. And that's when I started to really notice like, oh wow, like this is like I'm being kind of canceled for this. Like this is and then a sassy tweet here or there. Like I'll have people just about every show I do, I'll show up and the manager will be like, wow, we were getting a lot of calls about you, or wow, people wanted to get this show canceled, or wow, look at these emails. Yeah, a show in Buffalo at a cigar lounge where people were calling not only the venue itself, but the surrounding businesses saying like Chrissie Mayr is trying to have a racist party
Oh
at the
Lord.
cigar lounge. I'm like, racist party? Okay. So, but then you got to get, and a couple gigs like have been canceled, but you have to really appreciate the ones that go, fuck it, we're still going to have this show. Like if there's enough of a crowd, like why not just have it? Who cares? And it's always the people that would never see a show, who aren't even comedy fans, who haven't even looked into what you do. Because if
Well,
you were to listen to the majority of my stand-up, it's not even that spicy. It's like a lot of it's like pretty normal topics, like talking about relationships, and myself, like self-deprecating material. It's like it's really nothing that crazy, but because of my like online persona and what comes up when you Google me, it's like, oh my God, she's this like ultra far right extremist.
Yeah, I think I saw someone comment on one of your tweets that they called you a thought, and I was like, "What are you talking about? Have you even watched? Like I said, have you ever
That's a
listened to her or
compliment, and
whatever?"
I hope that person knows I appreciate it.
Well, what you were saying about people who don't even listen to comedy or or watch stand up, or what you being in sort of the nerd space with Geeks and Gamers and Anna, that Star Wars girl, you've probably heard them complain about this. Is a lot of the people who get frustrated with say like Batman comics or whatever, they haven't even read the comics. They watched Beware the Batman, which is one of the worst Batman TV shows ever, or they watched the Ben Affleck version, and they're like, oh, I know all about Batman because I saw X content. And you're like, or insert content here, whatever, however you want to describe it. And it's like, no, you don't know the source material, the rich history.
That's
And I see
annoying.
that, not just with you, but I see that like with Tim Dillon and with Dave Landau and other sort of comedians, the Hodge brothers even. It's very virulent where some of the gatekeepers aren't even a part of that fandom
They're
or
not
that
even
community.
fans. Yeah, or like you
Exactly.
have a comedian on your show and you're like, "Oh my God, I'm so offended." And it's like, don't you know this person's style? Don't you know the kind of jokes they make? Like, don't you know that they're even joking, that they even are a comedian? Um, it was funny because
And this is
a
one of
lot
the
of
reasons I don't review stand-up specials on my website. It's because I like stand-up comedy when I watch it, but I have a very, I don't want to say niche, but I only like certain types of humor. And so I don't go in and bash a comedian that I've only listened to once on my website. I can do that with movies and films because I watch a lot of movies and films, but I don't do
well,
that with
you
stand-up
could. I mean, you
specials.
could like I think my like I've done only one album, but I would say like if you just listen to the album I put out, like that's a pretty good representation of at least where I was when I recorded it like 2 years ago. I think it is. I think you could record like just one album or one clip of somebody. Like of course you can judge. It's like your first impression of that person. It's like don't like it's it is interesting. It's like I'm just contradicting myself. Like you don't have this long-term knowledge of comedy. How dare you review it? But if you can listen to somebody and go, okay, they're hitting me like they're not funny. I'm not finding them funny, or I am finding them funny. And whether you've listened to a 5-minute clip or an hour special, it's like people are of course can judge and will judge. Um, I just think like I get more upset when people have a comedian on and they're like getting triggered and or they're like
Right.
it's like this person is like first and foremost a comedian or they're a provocateur or they're here to like kick over the beehive, so to speak. Like a
That
lot of
happened
folks.
at America's Got Talent recently, I think. This comedian came on and started making fun of the judges, and they all got, like, just incredibly offended, and it's just like, that's just a
That's
style
like
of comedy.
pre-planned. Like they know that's an act. Like they all know
Oh,
like what's
interesting.
coming. Everyone knows the material. Everyone knows the jokes that somebody's gonna do. I think there's. I mean, I was like I tried out for it and I like got eliminated like pretty quickly. But everything is like you do multiple passes of the same set. So I don't know, but maybe it's different when you get to the higher levels of the show. But I would say with anything like that's on mainstream TV, it's like it's rehearsed and everything's like pre-checked. They
Do you
just know
s
it'll
Oh,
get
sorry, go
ratings to be
ahead.
like, "Oh, I'm offended," like, and they plan it out.
Oh, yeah, you're probably right more than like, I always say that about different things that happen at events like the Oscars or the Golden Globes. I was like, "Oh, that was totally
Oh
staged, you
my
can tell."
god. I know you can make an argument for the slap being staged.
Oh, I do all the time. I got into an argument with someone on Twitter, and I, like, went on, I was like, "Oh, he did the stage slap. His hand looked like this, not like the," yeah, I did
Oh.
the whole thing, the whole conspiracy theory. But, how do you think, and, how do you think as far as, pushing back against those sort of gatekeepers? I mentioned Dave Chappelle's doing it. You do it. Do you see a change where people are starting to wake up and go, "Hey, we're kind of all this gatekeeping is making the comedians not funny." Like, I don't think I've ever laughed. I haven't laughed at a Jimmy Kimmel joke since they did that thing where his deleted scene from Batman versus Superman. I think that was the last time I laughed at anything from Kimmel. Conan a little bit more so. He actually is genuinely funny, but I feel like he gets stifled a little bit. But
Yeah.
do you see a change happening sort of in the comedy sphere?
Gosh, I don't know because, like, all my close friends are people who also push the boundaries, like Lila Hart, who's, like, kind of famously also unjabbed and, like, very vocal. I would just say, like, if anything, comedians are censoring themselves. Like, I have a few friends that I know are closer to where my opinions are, but they're afraid to, like, really be out and do, like, full-blown passionate material about it because their management may not like it or they may not get the next late night spot because of it, or they're afraid to be seen by the internet as a radical or an extremist. There people are so afraid of being put into a box or having the wrong name called of them that they'll actually just hold themselves back.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so tell me, for anyone who might not know, where can people find you and your work?
Oh yeah, ChrissieMayr.com for show dates. I've got a lot of dates coming up. I'm going to be in Bridgeport, Connecticut next Thursday, the 23rd, New York City, next Saturday, the 25th, doing two shows in New York City that night. Then I'm heading to Staten Island, April 7th, Jersey, April 8th, Vegas at the end of April on the 27th. I'll be in Dallas at the beginning of May, the 5th and 6th. Then I'm going to Richmond, Virginia in August, and then I'll be at Anime Matsuri in August as well in Houston. And I'm doing a headlining show in Houston. I think it's August 11th, kind of during
Nice.
the convention.
That's really cool. And thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. This was a fantastic conversation.
Thanks for having me, Jake. It flew by.
It sure did. And to everyone who's watching, thank you so much. Like I said, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. I'll put link to Chrissie's website in the pinned comment below, and I'll see you next time right here on Studio Jake.